There you go. Okay. So, welcome to the Tuesday night Big Book Workshop. I'm John. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic. It's Friday, January 7th, 2020. This workshop is going to be facilitated by Tony.R, and I'll be reading for him tonight. We'll keep everybody muted for the duration of this workshop, except for the facilitators. Any inappropriate behavior will not be tolerated, and you'll be removed by one of the co-hosts. Please note, Tony will be taking questions after the meeting, so if anything kind of comes up when he's talking, write it down. Apparently it's going to be all over. We're moving tonight. We're going to pull it all together. And how we open this meeting is with the set-aside prayer. Dear God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, this book, my disease, these steps, and especially about you, dear God, so I might have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. It's all yours, Tony.
Right on, recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date's April 8, 1989. Did a lot of meditation today about tonight, and then we're moving in a new direction. We hear a lot of different ideas presented about this thing, and nobody really formulates the design of this thing. Everybody talks about the mechanics of this thing, but there's an actual formula. There's a design to this thing that, as participants in a spiritual path or in our development, they talk about, we covered it, of something gradually becoming a working part of the mind. They talk about that on 87 and step 11, and a lot of people, you hear people say stuff like, oh, step 6 is, some fun defects. You ever hear people say, so there's a lot of misunderstanding, or things to work on behaviors. And none of this stuff is about working on yourself, right? Which is hard to believe, because that's one of our favorite topics, is working on ourselves. We all have something to work on, right? And that's not the idea of this, because as soon as you become self-focused again, which is our main problem, right? Our first obsession is us fixing us, right? And so we spend a lot of time doing that. And one of the things that they started talking about on the initiation of this thing was, I'm just going to hit the pages and you could look at it later, right? But they talked about on 60, it talked about being convinced we're at step 3, right? And one of the things that they acquired, that we had to acquire, the same information, is that the first requirement is that we be convinced any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. A self-willed person. How did we discover what that looks like? Is we had to do the 4, right? Anybody have a different perspective after they did their 4 than before they did their 4? So it became blatantly clear. And if you kind of look at what they're talking about here on 64, they talked about, and we're actually going to read it, because this is actually the format of everything that we're trying to incorporate, but with spiritual principles, right? This is the idea that we're trying to incorporate with our lives, right? This formula, but with the application of spiritual principles. Why is that? Because lack of power is our dilemma, right? We understand that, because if we could have changed self with self, how many people would have never even considered doing this process, right? So we got to a place where like we seen that we had to, or else what? We'd continue to drink because we can't create this shift or psychic change. So that's part of the first miracle that happens here, is this shift, this phenomena that happens to enable us to recover from something. So if you could experience this entity, this power on a level where it creates a total psychic change within your own experience and outlook upon life, then what other problem in your life wouldn't have the same ability or the same experience with? So we see the limitation to this whole thing will always be us, right? And lack of power will always be our dilemma. That's why we're always seeking. It's a continuation of seeking, because there's an obstacle that we'll be facing for the rest of our lives. Anybody have an idea what that is? It was the first person you greeted when you woke up this morning, right? You will always be the handicap to the full experience of this thing. Will always be the limitation to what's available to this thing, right? There's way more Oh, beautiful. There's way more available to us than we'll ever really experience. And that's really hard to kind of comprehend, right? It's kind of, we're used to kind of shopping at the corner store, and what they're trying to say is we're going to the big store, right? Where it's endless, what's available in those things, right? So the only limitation is this. So therefore, this was step 4. You want to lay us on that?
Yep. Page 64, the first paragraph that starts on that page. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke.
Okay, so we see, isn't that weird? When we looked at step 11, that's what step 11 was all about, is a continuation of monitoring of my thinking and my emotional well-being. Isn't that funny? But I had to go through 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, but really get into 11 to tie this all together. So I see what they're talking about now. How many times in step 11 does it ask us to pause, remind ourselves many times each day, not each week, each month? Step 11 is the only one that says many times each day. You said people say, oh, it says that in step 10. No, step 10 is an overview of what we're trying to accomplish. Step 11 teaches us how to do that, right? Go ahead.
Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process.
So what happens is, isn't that at the end of the review at the night? We review our day, we looked at the end of and it asks us some key points. Was I kind and loving toward all? Where do I want to manage? We do a self-assessment on the day stuff, on today's stuff. We're not looking at the entire past anymore. We're not looking at the future. We're looking at how I conducted myself today, which is really cool, right? I'm getting back to trying to be where my feet are, trying to be where the power exists. It's in the now, right? Go ahead.
It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. So
we see that that's the purpose of 4 and 5, but it's really the kind of the residual is in 6. Some of the stuff that I hang on to, but I see the damage of them. See, there's nothing good about this stuff, right? And we'll go on to talk about. Go ahead.
If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values.
So we see the shift in our thinking and our ideas about these things that we carry. The things that, how we used to view other people and hang on to, is actually the same vice that we're poisoning ourselves with. Rational or justifiable anger. We see that really we're creating our own demise by continuously punishing us for something that they did in the past. It robs us of our energy. So we hear people, we're giving away our power. We're actually not giving away our power. What we're suffering from is lack of power for a different experience. Right? In order for me to have a different experience from this attachment, I need the ability to tap into this power to create a shift in my psyche or my view or my energy. Yes? And to redirect it in a new way. Because self still wants me to look at something this way. Anybody find themselves in these moments of continuous perpetual thought of the past, of emotional deformities and attachment? We're in it. Ever notice it? And when you become aware of it, that's the deciding factor. Do I apply spiritual principles to this for a different experience, or do I continue harboring these things? And a lot of us, it may sound kind of weird, but we take some form of satisfaction by harboring it and reliving, refeeling, and repunishing. Anybody? And that's that step 6 stuff, that stuff that's moving forward from the past, that's still determining how I react today. And so when people say, oh, these shortcomings, well, shortcomings, how I respond to something today. I fell short of the mark or short of the idea. That way, when I do a review tonight, it's kind of, I didn't handle that well. Well, why is that? Because when I look at my inventory, because, my self-esteem or personal relationship or something that has to do with today. Well, if this is a continuous thing, then I see this is step 6, still determining and holding me hostage to a belief, an idea, an emotional deformity. Yes? So I have this assessment now, but I had to go through to see how these things, how it's governing my life. may be a little different in your life, but the principles are the same. Right? Go ahead.
We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure.
So we see that in the 4, we see that in the 5, and then in 6 it continues. So there's nothing good about these things. Like we hear like I read this thing and said, oh, these fun defects. Well, then if you think it's a fun defect, then your view and understanding of it or your value of it is still incorrect the way you look at it. Because this thing is a flaw in your makeup that's causing your failure or deformity in your emotional, in the present. Yes? Even these things that you get some satisfaction out of really work toward your demise. Anybody? So I'm doing things that I don't want to do, right? And I'm not doing things that I do want to do. Why? Because I'm seeking some form of self to fix self. Some form of gratification based on self that alleviates the discomfort of the moment. Or anybody have that list? That causes you more problems. So we're aware of these things. So even though I'm being driven by these things yet, in step 11, I'm acutely aware of them. And I have a moment before I engage in any one of those things. There's a moment where I say, I'll take it from here. Anybody? Well, we went there fast. I told you. Okay, go ahead.
Being convinced that self manifested in various ways, what was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestation.
So what they did was they went through the resentments, the fears, the conduct, and the harms. But in there was a key that these emotional deformities, right? For when harboring such feelings on 66, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit and the insanity of alcohol return. So we see how many different things in a day that creates emotional shift in us based on our thinking. Anybody? We see it's an attachment to something in the past and I'm still hanging on to my view of it. And in order to correct it, I need to do what they talk about over here in step 11. And everybody says, if you're doing step 11, you're doing all of it. Right? We hear people say, oh, step 10 says, it says as we go along. It didn't say every day. As we go along. Right? We clean up the past, right? We continue to watch for these things. Continue to watch for these things. Where did we discover these things was in 4. It needs to become a working part of the mind. What? To learn how to master resentment, learn how to outgrow fear, and how to bring my conduct into alignment with my hope, dreams, and desires. Does that kind of make sense? Right? And so if you look at where they talk about at the bottom of 87, as we go through the day, we pause when agitated. Now, if you were to do this, then what they talk about here, as we go along. As I go along, I become aware of the shift that's happening and these things that's trying to motivate, drive me, being driven by these things, or this hostile takeover of an emotional or a situation that I'm living and that I can't get out of. Anybody been there? It is like I'm possessed by me again. And being driven by these things, and sometimes my awareness of it is totally absent till after the emotional deformity. After awareness says, oh my God, I didn't handle that too good. Oh my God, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Anybody have those things? So then what I do with that is the spiritual progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual progress. So if I was to pause, right, and after making my review, ask for forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken, will my life start changing?
Yeah.
And if that becomes a daily practice, how does that become a daily practice? It needs to become a working part of the mind. What needs to become a working part of the mind? Well, what they talk about is at the end of how it works, they talk about is a shift in thinking and understanding. What do you mean by shifting of thinking and understanding? So at the end of page 60, at the top of the page, I don't know if it's coincidence where you turn the page, it's kind of like a new story beginning, right? Like page 58 and 59 talk about really our demise unless we experience this thing. Page 60 talks about having started this thing, right? And what does step 12 say?
Page 60, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
So we see that the steps turn into principles. Well, what are the principles? So if you kind of, you get a lot of different people's ideas of this and that, but what it looks like in step 11 is the ability to assess that there's something wrong. So step 1, the principle is, what is the problem? What's happening here? Why am I feeling, what's creating this deformity? And based on my 4th step, I'm able to assess where the problem is coming from. Is it me? Is it somebody else? Is this somebody else's problem? Is it my problem that I've taken? That, right? I'm able to say, is my self-esteem, my security? What's going on here that has me responding, thinking, or feeling the way I do? Right? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. This is how you can participate a bit. Just give me a nod or something, because some of you are starting to look at me like, oh my God. Okay, so that way I know I'm on track a bit instead of, oh my God, his cheese has slipped right off his cracker. He's gone, people. He's beyond recall. Okay, so help me along here, right? So we see that, so then once we assess what the problem is, I mean, what is the spiritual principles or solution to this problem? Yes? What do I need to do? What do I need to engage in? Is it the resentment prayer? Is it the 3rd step prayer? The idea is there. Is it some form of 11 that create shift? Is it 6 stuff that's happening? Some form of pausing and directing and being willing to move along spiritual lines. Yes? Yeah. The incorporating of this access to this power that creates change. The removal of the blocks that I create based on my thinking and my emotions. So in order to do that, I need to step back from it and redirect my thinking along these lines. And how do it, so that's why the second half of how it works talks about, so this change, we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. The principles we have set down are guides to spiritual progress. So what am I looking at? So step 3 is, do I want to apply this spiritual principles that I've discovered as the solution to step 2, or do I want to take it from here? Because remember, we got our will back. It's up to us. Do I want to live by spiritual principles, or do I want to take it from here? How many people's taking it from here? I'll take it from here. And then we get convinced again that any life run on self-will can have. What convinces us is pain and conflict, and we get to a place where we can't stand ourselves anymore that we created. So we see nothing happens by mistake. We are then again the creator of our own demise. So then what's the principle is, the next part is humility. Right? So they talk about this thing in step 5 that we're learning here. And what is this recipe that we're learning when we get to this thing? They kind of outline this when we get into action that we're hoping to achieve, and why we're in conflict. They tell us why we're in conflict here, because we need to take certain things. So this principle never changes, right? They took stock all right. And so when we take stock is the moment, the pause, the review, the situation of the disturbance in the moment. What am I going to do about this? Right? And a lot of times, a lot of us continue to live in it. Anybody? Right? Because that's been the story. We're stuck to the story. We're not used to recreating a new story in the moment and re-narrating the narrator. Right? Because this thing that matters has told us how we feel, how we think, how we look at things, and how we view. But we've done an inventory to see that this is not happening. So what am I lacking in today that would stop me from having the experience that's available to me? So what I need to do is, where they talk about in step 11, we're undisciplined. So we allow God to discipline us in the simple way we've just outlined. What did they just outline is step 11, right? Because if I'm doing these principles, I'm always seeking counsel with something greater than myself, right? I'm in constant shift from a fear-based Neanderthal, right, to being able to be present and enjoying the space I'm in. So what they talk about here, they took stock all right. No, they took inventory all right. Go ahead.
What page are you on now?
873.
73, okay. Okay. Having persevered with the rest of their program, I'll start at the top 73. They wondered why they fell. We think the reason is they never completed their house cleaning. They took their inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock.
So they took inventory all right. So the step 11. So that principle is we're taking inventory, we're still assessing. Right? Do I want to live by spiritual principles? What I found was the solution in step 2 to the problem I'm experiencing today in step 1. So I'm making assessments. So the principle of step 1, what's the problem? Principle of step 2 is what's the solution? Step 3 is, am I willing to abandon myself to this process, or do I want to take it from here? What would stop me from pursuing spiritual principles is this here. What I need to re-establish is this thing of humility that needs to take place in me. So you hear people say, "Oh, I drop to my knees in the morning," and I never do. When I drop to my knees and pray is when I'm suffering from me. It's an act of humility for me. God don't care how you pray. I don't think God see, not on his knees, so I'm not listening. Right? I don't think the act is for me, because even when nobody is around, the defiance of me praying on my knees still makes me uncomfortable. Anybody? Even I've been coming up to 34 years doing it. When I do step 3 in a group, I still have a part of me that's still like resistance to it. Even when I do the 3rd step prayer, there's a shift. There's a little, like, there's this, I don't know how to describe it, but within me, I notice there's a little shift that happens, right, when I do that prayer. A bit of resistance into the spiritual realm. So here it goes. So what do we need to do?
They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they'd humble themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary.
Okay, so hold it. So necessary to create this shift. Right? So that's the formula of this whole thing. I need to learn these things. If I can't establish these things within my experience today, then I'm going to punish myself of getting convinced of the need of doing these things, these principles of telling on myself. You know, sometimes when you're sober a little while, it gets hard to reveal that you still got problems. Anybody? Right? I'm living a spiritual life. I can't have problems. Damn right you're going to have problems. You're always going to, as long as you're involved, there's going to be problems. Right? So the humility is the constant reminding ourselves, okay, God, like, I need some help from you. That's why step 6 says we continue to pray until the willingness comes. I know there's nobody here that's ever suffered from defiance here. I know that. I know you guys got it right from the get-go. But I find even within myself, sometimes the resistance to humility is strong. The force is strong within this one, right? Like, I will. Like, it's crazy. The things that I recognize, my ego is so huge that sometimes it will think it will go on living after it kills me. But the humility is, this is kind of weird, allowing God to come into the situation or accessing this power to create the change that I wouldn't be able to create, or the shift, right? And so what does it kind of mean? I was sober a little while, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. I was doing really good, got the sports car, got the money, got the girlfriend, things are happening, right? But I'm spending other people's money, I mean the men's money, still thinking it's mine. Right, I'm not taking care of certain things that I should be taking care of because I want mine. I know none of you have ever suffered from that, right? So I go fishing, and I end up on the other side of the lake, and I'm fishing, and the sun is beating down on me on off the water. I start getting exposure. I'm not doing good, right? Like a part of me realizes I'm in trouble. Like, I'm in trouble. I'm leaning on the rocks. And I'm in trouble. I know I'm in trouble. And I see a boat, right? They're going by, and I said, God, you know me. You know I'll die right in this spot before I ask for help. Could you ask them? Could you ask them to ask me if I'm all right? May sound kind of weird, but that was the most humility I could come up with in that moment. I acknowledged that left in my own device, I'm going to die here, but I'm not going to ask. That's why we do 12-step work. We intervene. We seek you, right? You don't seek out. You think you picked us, but we've been working with some of you for months. Oh, you want to be our spot? Okay, sure, right? Like, we've invested a lot of time and energy in you, right? So these guys go, hey, do you want to, are you all right? Would you like a ride back? I said, if it's not too inconvenient. I couldn't see me as everybody else was seeing. I got in this canoe, and they rowed me back, and part of my brain still, be cool. I'm red as a lobster. I'm red like Rob's shirt, like I'm like, right? But in my brain is like, be cool, be cool. Anybody ever been there? Come on, in different areas, this is the principle of it, right? And so, if you've ever been in a canoe, there's the bar, it's against my back and it cuts the circulation off to my leg. It's just getting better, right? The whole experience is just getting better, right? So I go to get out of the boat and my legs are numb. And people are, I said, be cool. And I'm hanging on to my track pants because they're soaked, they're falling down. I'm hanging on to my fishing rod. And I'm thinking I'm looking cool, right? Like I got this, right? And whatever problem it is, we all handle it the same way. My girlfriend at the time looks at me, she goes, oh my God, are you okay? Right? No, yeah. I go back, and it was like that act of, even though I wasn't able to muster the ability to ask the people around me, I went to God, and God was able to do for me what I was unable to do for me. Does that kind of make sense? The humility of asking God to do this is, and that's what they're kind of getting at here. How many different situations do we have in our life where we're kind of like the same thing? Right? I can't seem to budge on this. I can't seem to shift my thinking. I can't seem to ask. I can't seem to create a shift. That's where we pray for the willingness to be willing. God, you know me. God, help me out here, please. Right? I am defiant. I know I'm defiant, right? And I just can't bring myself to. And so I ask for the shift until it comes, right? So that's really good. I don't know why I went there, but that was very revealing. I've never had that problem since. It's all been smooth sailing, right? So the application of this thing comes in all forms of ways. So there's two ways humility is acquired. It's either self-induced or life-induced, but it's coming. Your lesson is coming, right? And so hopefully, where they talk about in the same in regards to, hopefully we don't have to be continuously beaten into a state of reasonableness. It's hard to believe that we cause our own problems, that we cause our own mindset and emotional deformity, isn't it? It's hard to believe that no matter where I went, I'd have the same mindset, the same problems, and the same emotional deformities. That the freedom that they talk about, a new freedom and new happiness is within me, but the resistance to that. So how does this thing get recreated? And that's where step 11 comes in, right? This continuation of looking at this thing and the recipe of the pause, right? Or I like the new one now. Wait. Why am I talking? Right? That's the new one. So a lot of us should practice that a lot, right? Because we try to talk ourselves out of it. So as I'm cleaning up the past, I'm going to have a lot of different stumbling blocks. Where? Within me or within life? Within me. How I think things are going to turn out, how I think they're going to repercut, all that other. So who am I trusting and relying on?
God.
Well, me. If I'm having conflict with the outcome of something, I'm trying to dictate. It's like our ego is so huge that I've worked with enough people to realize I'm not alone in this area. Or like where my sponsor used to say, well, no, we pray about things, not for things. And sometimes I pray for things and answers. Anybody here? Right? But I'm asking God for, here's my list and the power for him to carry it out. How many people has prayed that way? Here's how I think things should be. Can you take care of it? That list, right? And why are you waiting so long, God? Like, why are you waiting, right? That kind of thinking, right? And so what's really interesting is this process as we clean up the past is, how do I bring God into this so I could have a different experience? Because what's our purpose now is to be of maximum service to God and the people around us, right? As I go clean up the past, what I'm allowing people to do is find healing within their own life and be an example of this power in my life. Remember they talked about that in the fear? We let him demonstrate through us what he can do. We become channels of this power. So when I'm in conflict, because I'm attached to me and my instincts. When I'm in peace, I'm trusting and relying on something other than myself. So it's a pendulum within inside of me. And I'm the deciding vote which way it goes. That's why it says many times the interruption, the stopping and reallocating. And that's what it talks about. And so it talks about when we learn certain prayers or ideas, why do I need to do that? Because as I go to make my amends, I need to be constantly diligent about the fact of where's my energy, where's my thinking, and what idea do I have attached? Do I have my old idea attached to this, or am I looking for a new experience? And this is where I see how God really works in my life. Do I trust and rely on God? Well, how can I? I haven't got the total experience yet. I need to allow that to unfold in shifting in thinking, feeling, emotions, and experience, right? And as I see these unexplainable things start to happen in my life, I kind of start trusting and relying more that he'll provide all that I need if I keep close to him and perform his work well. So on page 63, there's a contract there between us and God. I've used that and still today, it's the same contract between me and God. Right? As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully. Right? So that contract is then again, we're at step 3. Am I going to pursue a spiritual solution to this dilemma that I'm having? So the principle is, am I going to take it from here, or am I going to seek God's counsel, help, or counsel with another person and bringing this new experience about? Does that kind of make sense? So one of the things, and when I look back over my experience to the access of this power and my step 8 stuff, so I had my step 8, the 6 and 7, I was aware of these things. I'm in counsel with my sponsor and other people in regards to my amends. I'm not shanghaiing people. In my morning meditation, I'm asking what God would have me be. I have my list there. And intuitively, at the subconscious level, that 6 tells me what I should be working on. Right? And so one of them was to go back and take care of the amends to a family that I haven't seen in 16 years. In my brain, they don't love me, they don't like me, they want nothing to do with me. The experiences here has nothing to do with that anymore. You're a demonstration of something greater than you. You're going to go make amends for the conduct that you engaged in, causing them harm, ill feelings, and a separation between us. And you're going to allow them the healing that they need by participating, not in a place where I'm a doormat, but in a place where I'm able to hear what they have to say to the trouble I caused them. They, like ourselves, were sick. How did I cause the disturbance in them? Right? That they talked about in 67. So I couldn't fly at the time. So what I did was I sought counsel with some people. And what they said was I had to take a bus from BC to Quebec. It's a 4-day bus ride, right? And what they said was there's no cell phones. It was way back then. And what they said was the people I sought counsel with was sit in front of the bus. Don't sit in the back of the bus. Awesome. Okay, when you get to these bus depots where there's a changeover, go and ask if there's any friends of Bill W. over the PA system if you need to kind of check in with someone or seek. Right? So I was doing, they said, bring a cassette with you on the grapevine, right? So in order of the stuff. So I got the grapevine cassettes on step 11, 6, and 7. Actually, great stuff. The grapevine, you can get it on CD or audio. And I'm listening to this stuff and I'm going, I got my big book. I got all that stuff. So I'm stopping all the way. And the closer I'm getting, the more anxiety I'm starting to experience, because who am I starting to see counsel with? I'm starting to see counsel with me again, and I'm creating a different experience. So my willingness is starting to kind of waver a bit, right? And it's like the saying is, you never create a good sailor in good weather, right? You want to learn how to sail, it's got to be. So where's my reliance? And the only way you really know where your reliance is in life situations. So I'm on the last part of the trip. And I'm sitting, some of you have heard this, and I'm sitting in the front of the bus, And I'm in counsel with God, and I said, you said you'd look after me. On page 63, you said you'd take care of all my needs. I'm not feeling it. I went to 4 bus stops. I asked for friends. There's nobody, nothing. You're dropping the ball. I said, you're dropping the ball. So I'm in total, full-fledged stuck on self, but I'm unable to see that. Now I'm calling God out. Right? Nobody's ever done that here, right? I'm calling God out, and God's like, come on. Look at, you're in the inability to see what I'm doing for you because you're stuck on you. That's what I learned from that exercise then. I couldn't see God if he was right in front of me because I'm got self stuck on self again. So I just became calm, and as I was talking to God, this lady beside me goes, you okay? I said, yeah. I took my headphones, just gave me a little nudge. You okay? I said, yeah, I got to go see these people. Haven't seen them in 16 years. I'm in this process where I'm making amends. And she says, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've been a friend of Bill W.'s for the last 20 years. Sitting on the bus beside me. I'm calling God out because he's not looking after me the way I think. And he sat somebody right beside me for the last part of the trip. So how many times do you think when I've had a conflict in my thinking that I thought of that moment, how God was there and my inability to see it, and when I became aware of it, it created a total shift in everything. And I went and made these amends, and one person became hostile. Instead of doing a confrontation, what I did was pray. I stopped with inside of myself. I just prayed. I said, God, you said you had me. I'm here. I'm willing. My cousin stepped in and then took my defense on my behalf. So really remarkable things started happening. So what happens with these other amends that I'm in the process with, and I'm having a hard time creating a shift, right? Like anybody have those? They create anxiety, they cause problems. So what do I do with these things? I'm praying, they're not creating a shift. I've talked to people, they're not creating a shift. So there's a recipe here. So I've tried all these things. I looked at 6 and 7. I prayed about it. I've talked to another human being. But I'm not creating the shift necessary to have a different experience. How many people's had that here? And so what happens is, as I become more fixated on these things, what starts happening is my inability to create a shift necessary for a different experience. Anybody have that here? So I'm becoming more problematic. When I'm going to meetings, I'm talking about this thing. I'm talking about acceptance and how I'm still stuck on that stuff. I'm talking about letting it go, and turning it over, and I just got an upside down problem now, right? It's not creating the shift, right? This thing that I'm trying to create, what we call soothe or sobriety. I'm trying to create myself by being morally comforted within myself. Anybody ever try that here? And it's not happening. The more I'm talking to me, the more crazier I'm becoming. Anybody? And I can't shake it. I just can't shake it. So what do? So on page 89, what does it say? What's the recipe that Bill learned when he was going through a hard time? So remember when Bill got this relationship, he was still in treatment. He had a way of living now that allowed him to access counsel with something greater than himself. He talked about this, right? Where he talked about where when he was in counsel with himself, he was in problem. But when he was to check his newfound thinking with the new God consciousness within, it created a shift because he got access to power. That recipe. Have we learned that recipe? Right? And so in Bill's story, one of the founders, we see he was plagued with waves of depression that nearly drove him to drink again. What nearly drove him to drink again was his thinking and his inability to create a shift. Anybody like that here? The more I thought, the worse things got. But I can't see it, right? So that's why we got the step 11 recipe. If I'm doing 11, it's not lasting 3 or 4 days. When I start getting stuck on self, guess what? The first thing I stop doing is praying. Oh, I'm thinking about it, but I'm not actually praying. I'm not doing 11 anymore. I'm not doing a review. I'm not asking what corrective measures. I am now in full conflict with me. Anybody there? And I'm starting to form subtle forms of Tourette's everywhere I go. Nobody around me, but man, the conversation's getting loud. You ever notice when it gets loud in your head, you start verbalizing it? Because the energy's got to go somewhere, right? You ever have anybody look at you weird? You're like, I'm on the phone. You're not on the phone. Okay, so what do? I'm jammed in. I'm praying. I'm doing all this stuff. Here's the recipe. Go ahead. Practical.
Page 89, chapter 7, working with others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics.
Nothing. So when you've tried everything and you're not getting a shift, a nice way of saying get your head out of your keister, right? Because all you can see is crap, right? They used to have a thing when when I'm not even going to say, I'm going to move on. I said, we're changing. You guys must have been praying hard. So, right, intensive work with other, what?
It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion.
When other activities fail. Right? So Bill talked about his experience. He would be lifted up when he worked with a new person. Because when you're working with somebody new, you realize what you're going through, that you prayed one day to have the problems that you're complaining about now. That the challenge you're having now, you thought would never be possible. Right? And here you are having an experience that self still trying to talk you out of, but because you did an inventory and because you learned this recipe, right? That's why it talks about diligent, to talk about it'll always materialize if we work for it. What are we working for is to become more of a working part of the mind. So when I work with another person, something shifts. So all the most troublesome time in my life, when life really weighed me down through we all have it, it didn't make sense to go to the meeting half an hour to help chairs. I'm not the chair, just to go help with chairs, put the literature, go help with coffee. Go meet a new guy that's still shaking and puking, and I talk to him. And as I talk to him and talk about my experience, something shifts in me. And the problem that I went in there with is not consuming me anymore. I leave there with a new perspective. And that's happened many times in my sobriety. But the place to go where you allow God, this is kind of like your own discovery of the things in you that cause your deformity. And the only way you see that is as time goes on, right? And so we like to think we're total God-reliant, but really we're not. Because when stuff happens, how fast do I go to my own thinking before I start praying? How fast do I go to the negotiator before I start praying? How fast do I start thinking how things are going to turn out if I do this, if I do that, if I do that? What am I going to say about this? What am I going to say? How much time do I spend in that place of self? Any life run on self-will, self-thinking, self-energy can hardly be a success, right? So we've seen the damage of that. So how does this enable us to have a different experience? It's a phenomenon. I don't know how it happened, but it saved my life more than a couple times. What that means is it saved me from the experience that was about to happen. What does that mean? The insanity was going to return if I continued on that path. Something had to intervene at a spiritual level to create a different change. Like when I was in a different time, I was seeking some outside help, and my life was going to shit. The person I was with, the wife left me for some other person in the fellowship. She's since passed, God bless her, rest her soul. She took my kid with her, took everything I had. I'm in a foreign place. My brother just died. I just spent a week with him. I came back to find out this person left, and it was like it was like crazy what was happening. Like I was just totally bewildered, and I was walking around with my lip on the ground. Anybody ever been there? My lip on the ground, I'm just bewildered. Like, I think I'm 7 years sober. This shouldn't be happening to me. I'm 7 years sober, for God's sake. Right? Getting outside help. I'm facing all these deals. I can't shake it. So I left the meeting. I'm in conflict. And I remember walking down the street, just overwhelmed with life. I couldn't create the shift that I needed for a different experience inside of me. I was closed in with life and the perception of what was happening to me. Anybody ever been there? So as I was walking down the street, this person put a case of beer in the back of their trunk. Now, you ask a normal person what that sounds like, they couldn't tell you. I could tell you exactly what that sounds like when that case of beer settles on the bottom, is the chimes start to ring. The symphony begins. Right? The clanking, anybody? The sitting of the 2-4 down there. Like you just, Yeah, as a normal person says, what are you talking about? We know what it sounds like. Anybody? And I'm walking, I hear that. It hits me. And then in my mind, I hear the opening of the case. You know what a case sounds like when you open it? Ask a new person. I mean, a normie. What? I know what it sounds like in the effort to rip that thing open, huh? Anybody? And this is all happening in my mind, and I'm going, and this jewel is starting to happen. I don't realize the insanity is returning. And I'm totally, I'm locked in it, right? Then I get this, the sleeve, the beer coming out of the sleeve. Anybody know what that sounds like? And the tst, and I'm there, right? And so I get back to my place, and just to back up a bit, and this, I believe, happens to all of us, one way or another. Before that, I found comfort in the fact that I still had my truck. Not God, not sobriety, I had my truck. Anybody go to, I got comfort because I still have this, I still have that. How many people's done that here? Well, I still have this, so I still got my truck. I was sitting, hand to God, I'm sitting in my apartment because I'm kicked out of I got my plants in my apartment, and anyways, and I'm sitting there taking comfort in that moment. And then I hear kaboom! I look out, somebody did a hit and run, they hit my truck. And they crushed the frame in it. Guy was saying, well, I don't know if God was saying it, but we say, so what else is before my relationship with you? The truck, okay, well, we'll remove that because I was just on loan. You were supposed to be dead a long time ago. You're forgetting your role here in our relationship, in our deal. You're forgetting it. You're starting to put these things before our relationship. I never knew it then. And so I was sitting there, and the lip now is like, it was like almost crying, right? And so then I have to have something. Then I said, at least I still got my stereo in my truck. It's a 5,000. At least I still got my stereo. That's all I got left. Somebody broke in and stole my stereo a couple nights later. I'm like crazy. I'm crazy. I've got 3-pronged fishing hooks, and they're coming back for the other part of the stereo. So, and I'm tying wires to it, and I'm going to get them when I get them. So you thinking I'm sounding crazy? Think I'm crazy? See me hooking in my truck these 3-pronged fish hooks, and they're going to get them, and I'm going to get them. When I get them, somebody's going to get hurt real bad. Now you ask me, how you doing spiritually? What do you mean? Like I can't get it. I'm stuck in self. So when I was walking down the street and that thing took over, I went home, and this thing hit me, and I dropped to my knees. And I realized at that moment I got God. I got everything I need. And it's never shifted since. It took me, again, losing everything to come back to that place of total reliance. So everything I have in my life now is on loan. None of it's mine. It's all on loan. Because anything that gets me in between me and my relationship, sobriety is not my number one priority. My relationship with God is. That allows me to have a relationship with my wife. That allows me to have a relationship with my dog, the people, the neighborhood. That allows me to have peace and contentment and happiness within inside of me. That allows me to show up in somebody's life and seek counsel when I wasn't able to before. Right? That allows me to do things that don't make sense. Right? That allows me to trust this intuitiveness and without the why all the time. Okay, you want me there? I don't know why you want me over there. I'm going to go over there. Why do you want me at that meeting? I don't know why you want me at the meeting. I'm going to go over there. Like when I turned myself in for my other charges, I was looking at penitentiary time. And so when I saw counsel, somebody told me something simple. I said, Tony, remember, the power you serve is greater than any power you stand before. Bam, that kind of hit me like, wow. Right? So I said, okay, God, you do this. This is you. You want me to take care of this? Give me the strength to take care of whatever your will is or outcome you want. Give me the strength to accept that. So as I went through, I traveled when I was supposed to travel. I ran into this guy. If I went a day before or a day after, I would have missed him. I ran into him. He gave me the number of his lawyer. His lawyer was moving to the bench, was getting kind of moving toward the idea of becoming a judge without getting too much into it. He heard my case. I had no money. He heard my case. He took my case. Right? And they went there. I told my life. I told them everything I had. And so when I turned myself in, they didn't want to give me bail. They gave me bail on 3 charges, and they didn't give me bail on the other. I had to make, I think, 6 trips, right, to the courthouse to get released. But while I was in jail, waiting for bail, I was doing 12-step work in there. In my cell, I'd go, okay, God, if this is what you want from me, and I'd talk to these guys, and it was in the Don jail. I talked to these guys, and on the one side, there's a red line, there's a bench with a red line. The black guys were on this side, the white guys were on us. I sat in the middle, and I just sat there, and I said, okay, God, what do you want? And I'd talk to these guys, life just ruined, and I'd talk to them about the freedom and happiness I found. And they said, what are you doing here? I said, God wanted me to talk to you today. That's what he has me doing here. Doing 12-step, passing on my experience. And I don't know if anything ever came of that, but the seed was planted, right? There was this other time. And this is where we come and trust and rely on. Is as I clean up the past, I start doing things that don't make sense, but I'm an agent to this power. That means God knows what I'm doing. So what does that mean? I got to trust and rely on these things that don't make sense, right? And I can argue with it, but as long as I do it. Because what does that mean? Somebody's making a call somewhere. What do I mean? Is that spiritual call, that desperation of please help, like Bill the second time in treatment. Remember that time? Nothing was changed, but something unlocked the key to something hurt him. I'm okay with God, this power, and the universe hurt him, and of his plea for something different. What it set in motion was, it says, I got your call. I'm passing it forward to one of my agents. The call went to Ebby. Ebby, give this guy a call. I don't want to give that guy a call. Give him a call. The phone rang. He answered. Here we are in Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know where. I'm surprised where I'm going with this stuff. This one time I'm in Belize. My life is spectacular. I'm in Belize. I'm enjoying my life. I'm smoking a cigar. I'm over by I'm living big shot. Something said, go stand over on the beach. So I don't want to stand on the beach. It's nice here. I'm by the pool. I don't want to go by. I said, okay. So I went over. I said, here. They said, no, over more. I said, here. This may sound kind of weird. Yes, here. I'm standing there. Now what? I said, just stand there. I said, okay. For how long? He says, I'll let you know. This is the conversation I'm having with this thing. This person's walking down the beach. They're looking at the ground. They're crying. They nearly walked right into me, and they looked up at me and says, oh, what's going on? The guy says, I just got out of jail. I got kicked out of my church. My family don't want me. I live on there. I said, I don't know what I'm going to. He says, God wants nothing to do with me. And then I talked to him about my experience with God. And I said, God has me standing here to talk to you that he knows who you are. He knows where you are. And your relationships with him is not with the people around you. Trust and rely on him. And he was also an alcoholic addict. I told him about my experience, and there's help available. What are the odds of that? Right? Because who knows what he was thinking on doing. This other time, I'm in what a life, man. I'm in Hawaii. And things, I have a bit of story without getting into the whole story. And my wife goes, what's going on? I said, this meeting wasn't happening. She says, what are you doing? So I said, I'm just going to go smoke a cigar under the palm tree and kind of get connected and ask God what's going on. Because there's something going on. Because all these different chains of event put me in a position of being in that place of, at that moment, wanting to go get a cigar and readjust. So I went and got a cigar, and I'm heading down out of the hotel. And I'm going over where it's really nice. This voice says, no, go over there. I said, it's not nice over there. It's all lava rock. It's not nice. It's nice over there. Something says, I don't care. I told you, go over there. I said, I don't want to go. Okay, I'm going over there. So I go over there. I said, I'm a little sarcastic with God. He's okay with me. Is here okay? I'm sitting on this retaining wall, and I'm having a tantrum with God. Okay, I said, I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what. Okay, I'm here. What is it? So I light the cigar and relax, and I look over, and there's 2 breakwaters, and this guy's sitting on the other side, of, like 30, 40 feet away from me, and his hands are going. He's like this, and I thought, oh, isn't that weird? It's like 10:30 in the morning, and he's like a newcomer. He's having a moment with somebody. He's all alone. He gets up. and he has to walk past me. And he walks past me and goes, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Good." He says, "Do you want a snow cone?" I said, "Snow cone." He says, "A beer." He has it on the beach in the sand, and it's not beside him, which is weird for us. So see how all these elements have to come into place? I'm sitting there. He gets his beer. He walks by me, and he stops and he looks at me. He goes, "I don't know why I'm talking to you or whatever." He says, "I live on the other side of the island. Something told me to come over here, where nobody would find me." He says, "I was just over there arguing with God." I said, "You're having a moment over there with somebody." I said, "How did it go?" He says, God wants nothing." Again, God wants nothing to do with it. Funny how we think that, eh? When things don't go our way, we blame God. He says, "God wants nothing to do with it." He says, "My wife just left me." He says, "I used to be a sober member of AA for 6 years." He says, "I just went back drinking." I said, "Allow me to introduce myself. My name's Tony Roberts. I'm a friend of Bill W.'s. God sent me from Vancouver to come meet you here in this moment. He sent me from Vancouver here, and he sent you from the other side of the island here to let you know that you're loved, you're accounted for, and that your life matters." How wild is that? How these moments that happen. And it may sound kind of weird, but things happen no matter where you are in your sobriety. When you bring it to God, weird things start happening. In early sobriety, I remember praying about things. I said, "God, you said you'd look after me. I need a job. I need a job." So something said, "Get a newspaper." I said, "I never get a newspaper." So I got a newspaper. They cut me out. They wanted me to go for a psych assessment. Long story. I phoned this job. He says, "Can you start tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah, I could start tomorrow." Started Friday. I worked Saturday. I worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I got paid Friday. Never happens. I paid my rent because, to back up, when I came back from, my brother goes, "What did happen at the welfare?" I said, "They want me to go get assessment. They want me to go get some help before they give me any more money," right? They want me to, So I said, he says, "Well, what are you going to do about rent?" I said, "God's got this." And then, so you got to picture this. Like where I sobered up, there's plants all over, they're moving product, there's guns, there's bikes parked all over, and there's me. "God's got this," and all the guys like, "Oh my God." So my brother walks in and goes to my sister-in-law. "What's going on?" He says, "Snap." He snapped. Right? So that's what he said. And I said, "God, you got this," right? So I got the job. Right, I got paid. I gave him his rent. I said, "Here, God's got this." The next day I went into work. I got fired for threatening the foreman. Right? But I got all that I needed. It may sound kind of weird. I got the rent. I got everything I need. Like, I'm unemployable. Like, I know it's hard to believe looking at him, but I've had problems. Right? So, but God had this. Another time, and I'll close. There's so many. And this is where your experience comes in. As I do these things, will I allow this thing to take place? Will I start trusting this intuitive, even though it makes no sense? Will I allow people, places, and things to direct me where I need to be? What does that look like? Sometimes somebody will ask you to do something. You don't have to know why. If you can do it, go do it. You'll find out why. My brother said, "Hey, can you go pick up the videos and return them to Blockbuster for me?" I didn't want to do that. I want to go to a meeting and talk about how great I'm doing. So he says, so I said, "Okay, I'll go pick." So I went there. I went downstairs. I grabbed the videos. On the way back, the phone rang. At that moment, I picked up the phone and said, "Hey, how you doing?" "My brother's place." "How you doing?" "No, he's not there." He says, "Oh, could you let him know it's work?" He goes, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "I'm a carpenter." He says, "Can you work?" I said, "Yeah, I can work." Right? And there's moment after moment, hundreds of things like this. And so what does that mean? When I get to this place, coming up to 34 years sober, I still have those moments. The film industry has crashed. I don't know where the money's coming, what I'm going to do. A guy says, "Hey, can you do my bathroom for me?" I wasn't looking. "Hey, you're a carpenter, can you do my bathroom?" "Yeah, I can do your bathroom for you." I got this thing in the mail. "Hey, you can start collecting your old age pension now." I know, I don't even look at it. I know, easy people. I'm just as surprised as you. I found, I'm going to start old age pension. Like I never thought I was making it past 35, right? Trusting and relying on God. It's an awesome thing. These principles that are laid ahead of me to access power And sometimes the best I can do is go be of service to somebody else. And those moments will turn into hours, and those hours will turn into days. And before you realize, the film of the story of your life will unfold in front of your life, and you'll be amazed before you're halfway through, and you'll realize that trusting God has been the greatest thing you ever did, because now you have the story of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you are absolutely amazed with the life you're living, and you have never been able to do it on your own accord. Live long and prosperous, and I hope you found tonight interesting. Love you guys. Let it happen. Don't rob yourself of what's available for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony. There are no dues or fees for any membership, but we do